Welcome back to my garden. This morning when I opened up YouTube, I was caught with some rather sad breaking news. The Liverpool forward, Diogo Jota, had tragically died in a car accident, together with his younger brother, also a professional footballer. Not as well known, but a footballer all the same. Apparently he was driving to catch a ferry. He'd had a surgical procedure, so the doctors had ironically suggested that it would be safer for him to go over land and water rather than flying. Tragic advice. Apparently his car blew a tyre whilst overtaking, crashed and caught alight, and both their lives were lost. Now, I always, when I see that sort of news, hear that sort of news, I can't help but think back to my youth, actually, when I'd been involved in a dreadful car accident. It was pretty much the same thing that had happened. I've spoken about it before, but very briefly, I'll retell the story. Returning after the end of semester exams with two friends, returning from the University of Cape Town to Port Elizabeth. We'd been up late, everyone was a bit tired, and the driver nodded off, hit the hard shoulder, pulled back sharply. We blew a tyre and left the road. Miraculously, no one was hurt. A few scratches and bruises, and that was about it. Diogo Jota, obviously, much less fortunate. But it got me thinking, and so I thought I'd mention something. Now, I'm not a Liverpool football fan. Of course, it's terrible news. And on the clip that I was watching, sort of paying homage, there are a lot of Liverpool fans devastated, sort of saying how although they didn't know him personally, it felt like losing someone from your family, and I guess that's what football means to a lot of people. So fair enough, it is devastating news. And to say or talk about it in terms other than that seems, and people would make out that, well, that shouldn't be done. And I thought about something. Now, this is a little macabre, and I do apologise if I'm going off on the deep end, and I certainly don't mean to offend. But it kind of reminded me about news reports whenever there's been one of those horrific school or university shootings in America. And inevitably, there will be politicians who say, our thoughts and prayers are with the victims' families, which is a perfectly reasonable thing to say. And now is not the time to think about, and obviously, the bigger picture questions, these politicians would say. In short, it's not after a devastating school shooting, it's not the time to talk about gun control. It would be almost indecent to do so. But as some commentators have observed, well, if that isn't the time, when is the time? And if so, why don't those conversations happen at some other point? Well, that's another story. And I certainly don't want to suggest that Diogo Jota's accident was anything other than, just one of those terrible accidents that happen to people from time to time all over the world. I suppose one of the first things that a reporter had mentioned was that they had mentioned his car, a Lamborghini. And it got me thinking, my own accident that I'd been involved in, and And certainly if we'd been in a Lamborghini, I wouldn't be here today. We were in a Peugeot 404, big old tank of a car. Tank enough that it absorbed a lot of the impact when we left the road and sort of started to roll. Perhaps a smaller, fast sports car, who knows, perhaps the impact would have been far worse. Certainly our tank-like vehicle didn't explode on impact. I mean, there was impact. The windscreen had been thrown 100 meters down the road, but that was it. And we turned out to be fine. So I'm not mentioning any of that because I think, I want to speak about how the fast rock and roll lifestyle of professional athletes and musicians and so on leads to tragic events. Because I have no idea if that is even remotely the case. Everyone spoke very warmly of Diogo. I mean, there was a feel-good factor at the time. I mean, he just had the best season of his life. Liverpool had won the league. Portugal had won the Nations League final. So he was on a real high from a sporting point of view. And he'd finally married his long-term partner, mother of his 3 children, an enormous and wonderful celebration. So a shocking thing to happen, but of course, a life lost young always is. And as I say, to draw lessons from it, some might argue is, well, insensitive. But perhaps we must. When these things happen, at the very least, it's a little poke in the ribs, a reminder, as the Stoics would say, Momento Mori. Remember, you will die. Your life is not infinite. Make the most of it. Use it well. Enjoy your life. And if, that involves some risk, fair enough. Of course, be prudent, be calculated in the risks you take. Now, I'm not 28, but I feel like I have a fantastic life stretching out in front of me. Decades of things that can be done, service that can be provided, joy to be had and shared. So, well, I must make the most of it, as must you. I say must. I'm giving an instruction here. Who am I to do that? Of course, I'm just suggesting that this is, I think, a path that we need to at least consider. But these thoughts always kind of bubble up whenever I see this sort of news. I also, strangely, I've been watching some videos based around an email newsletter that I receive about, well, this is to do with cognitive science. It's a chess email, and it's to do with the way in which our mind kind of freezes. And I'll leave that story for another day, the effects of cognitive overload. But I did kind of watching this news and then thinking about other news that is sort of swamping us on a daily basis, I saw an odd parallel between one of the examples that this cognitive scientist used. Said it's interesting how when you go into other people's homes, you very often are struck by different smells, a different scent that you pick up. And yet your own home seems curiously scentless, but it isn't. The same will be true for someone else coming into yours. They might notice something that's slightly different. And why is that? And I forget the term that they use, sort of semantic overload. No, it doesn't matter. But essentially what happens is a sort of it's like when you repeat a word. This was the example they used in the film clip. If you say flower, 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 at a certain point, the word sounds and the word written on the paper almost to have no meaning. At the beginning, you say flower and you connect it with a flower and you can see the flower. But if you just keep on repeating the word, and at some stage it almost seems like the word's wrong or you can't recognize it. You can no longer connect it. And this is what happens with this idea of the sort of aroma in your house. You are surrounded with it all the time. So eventually the sort of quick connection between stimulus and mental imagery or memory, eventually almost your brain, to sort of deal with limited cognitive space, kind of stops doing that. It becomes disconnected. And this is something that happens to us on a daily basis with the news. So we watch 7th of October unfolding news about Hamas and their horrific hostage capture, and then this war starts, and so it unfolds. But after a few years, we are struggling to even notice the latest bit of news. And yet we see some breaking story about a football player who tragically lost his life in a car accident, and it is vivid, it is powerful. And I think there's a lot to take away from all of that. That we need to make sure that we don't become dulled to what is important. And we need to value what we have. Well, I don't know. I wanted to make a video not because I'm in some sort of state of shock. I have no real knowledge or connection to this football player. I'm not a Liverpool supporter. But it did sort of make an impact. And then I thought, well, what better way to process that? And it is nearly the weekend than a garden chat. So it is what it is. Be interested to hear your take. Let me know in the comments below. Otherwise, I hope your lives are filled with joy and are free of that sort of bad news. None of us are free always, and if you have had some sort of equivalent tragic news, well, I hope you're processing it well. Whichever way it is, Memento Mori, we must remember to hold dear our lives. So that's it, a sort of somber video this week, but I make no apologies. And as I said, let me know what you're thinking. From a sunny Brazil, until next week.